There we go. Okay, so we're continuing to talk about prayer, and we're all putting effort into growing our prayer lives and developing ourselves as more consistent praying people and more effective praying people. It's something to grow in. It's something to literally put effort into learning and developing. I think that we're all trying to do that. So here are some principles. First of all, prayer is unfinished business. It's always unfinished business. And there's a verse in the Bible that I have found really scary, really intimidating. And it's 1 Thessalonians 5:17, because it says, pray without ceasing. And I say scary and intimidating. For me personally, I've read that verse and thought, what in the world? I'm supposed to just pray and never stop praying? And I have actually tried to do that at times and failed miserably. And, there's no reason though to be frustrated or discouraged over that, because there's a deeper understanding of this verse than meets the eye. And there's this phrase, without ceasing. It's used in multiple places in the New Testament in reference to prayers. Generally, Paul, here he says in Romans 1:9, for God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers. Well, I've read the book of Acts, and I know there were some times that Paul was having conversation with other humans. And so when he's telling the Romans, oh, I make mention of you in my prayers without ceasing, he doesn't mean my life consists of God bless the Romans, God bless the Romans, God bless the Romans, God bless the Romans, right? It's not I'm making mention of you without ceasing, nonstop, 24/7. I'm mentioning you in prayer every moment of every day. That's not what he means, because we know that the Apostle Paul spent time in prayer, but he also spent time doing other things. Even Jesus. Sometimes Jesus prayed all night long. That's praying. He's praying during that time. But other times he's talking to people. Other times he's eating lunch. Other times he's doing other things. So this idea of pray without ceasing, it's partly a language issue. The phrasing in the language that says without ceasing does not mean continuous with no gaps. There is a place that says the same words that actually does mean that. And that's in Acts chapter 12, where it says, Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. So the church fellowship, the church body, during the time that Peter was in prison, had what we sometimes refer to as a prayer chain, where they made sure there was prayer going on and it was continuous. They had a prayer meeting that was taking place at Luke's family's house, which seems to have been their sort of home base in Jerusalem. Maybe probably the same place where the upper room, where the Last Supper was had and the upper room prayer took place. Maybe not, but it looks, there's evidence that it was. In any case, prayer was going on in that home continuously, but not necessarily by any certain person the entire time. People came and went during this prayer meeting, spending some of their time in prayer, but the prayer itself never stopped during that prayer chain, which resulted in Peter getting out miraculously. But what I want you to know is that the original language wording in Acts 12:5 is different than 1 Thessalonians 5:17 or these other verses indicated at the bottom of the screen. These don't mean no gaps. What the Apostle Paul is exemplifying to us and instructing us about is that we're never done. We never pray our last prayer. think about it, a comparison of something that might make sense to us. Let me ask you a question for you to answer in your own mind. Do you work out? Now, in my case, no, I don't work out. I have. There have been times in my life where I could say I worked out, but I don't anymore. But there are some people who say, "Do you work out?" "Oh yeah, I work out." So I have stopped working out. Sadly, maybe I can restart. But there are other people who have not stopped working out. Now they don't work out 24/7, but they haven't stopped working out. They stopped a workout session to go and do other things, but they didn't stop working out. You see what I mean? They got back to it again the next day. Maybe they even missed a day somewhere, but they still didn't cease. Their workout lifestyle is not over. You see what I mean? And that's just one example. You could think of all sorts of things that we could talk and think in those terms. This is what we do, even though it's not every moment of every day. So pray without ceasing doesn't mean you must be thinking or uttering a prayer at every moment of every day. It means that the prayer you prayed yesterday doesn't do it for today. And the prayer you prayed today doesn't mean you've prayed enough. Prayer is a lifestyle. It's an ongoing, continuous thing. And we've looked specifically at the verses that let us know that God has designed us to where prayer needs to be a daily thing. It's a daily part of our lives. And we're not done praying just because we may have prayed this morning or last night. We got to keep on praying. And now, Jesus gave a parable relevant to this concept of prayer being unfinished business. Here's the way he kind of encapsulates the concept that I'm referring to here. Luke 18:1 says, he spake a parable unto them unto this end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint. In other words, don't give up on prayer. That's the point. Don't give up on prayer. Don't give up on God, and don't give up on prayer's ability to access God and access the intervention of God. So let's take a look at that parable here. This is another place where it gives the same parable. He says, there was in a city a judge which feared not God, neither regarded man. And there was a widow in that city, and she came unto him, saying, avenge me of mine adversary. And he would not do it for a while. But afterward he said within himself, though I fear not God nor regard man, yet because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. And the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge saith, and shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? So the lessons here, first of all, kind of fascinating that it's clear by what Jesus says here that the allegory, the parables have counterparts, right? That the story has something in it that corresponds to something that's a reality outside of the story. The allegory here, God is represented by this judge, and a person praying to God is represented by this woman. Now, it's not a story about God and someone praying. It's a story about a judge and a woman appealing to the judge. But it's an allegory giving us some insight into how prayer works. This judge is not a perfect representation of God. He is not God. But for the purpose of the point Jesus wants us to understand, the function and role corresponds. This judge is called unjust. God is not unjust. However, if he were, who's going to hold him accountable? You? Me? Absolutely not. God can do anything, and he's just going to be just because none of us can do anything about it. And so what this says here about this judge is that he didn't fear God or man. He had no concern about being held accountable for anything. That is like God. Now, fortunately, God is also good, and God is also loving and compassionate and generous. This judge may not have been all that, but what this judge does have in common with God is that nobody's, or at least he's not concerned about anyone holding him accountable for his actions. So when this woman is coming to him, it's not crossing his mind, I better help this woman so I don't get in trouble. That doesn't enter this judge's mind. And that's the same way it is with God. If we're coming to God with a request, God is not worried about being held accountable for his response to us. No one's going to hold him accountable. He does what he wants to do. And that's who he is. That's the way it is. But what he shows is that this judge doesn't even want to help this woman. And yet she got through to him. He doesn't want to help her. He doesn't have to help her. But she got through to him anyway, just because she wouldn't stop. That's the bottom line of this story. She would not stop. And this judge realized that, like, this woman is not going to leave me alone. So I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do what she's asked me to do, even though nobody's going to make me do it. And I don't really want to do it. I just am going to get her off my back and do it. So that worked with this judge. Fortunately, God's attitude is nothing like this judge, but Jesus is still using this illustration for us so that we'll, and he's saying, if that worked for this case, how could you imagine that you cannot get results with your God? You are his own chosen. That's what elect means. You're his chosen. You know, we talked about the fatherhood of God and how that we get the best of both worlds, where we're natural born children, but we're also adopted children. He didn't have to become our father. It's like an adopted father that chose us. We are his own elect. So it is a reality that God doesn't necessarily bring to attention just because we utter a request, and necessarily just drop everything and respond in the way we want him to immediately just because we ask, just like a good parent won't always do. But don't misunderstand that to think that means that you cannot get results with God. This woman got results with this judge because she wouldn't stop. That's how God wants us to approach him. Don't stop. Don't give up. I will answer you. Don't take my silence as a refusal or as a shutting you out. I'm inviting you to keep appealing, to keep crying to me day and night. That's what it's all about. And then check out the way Jesus ends this lesson. He says, nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? That's not coming out of left field. That's not some random comment. That's coming off of this story. It's coming off of this lesson and this exhortation to not give up on prayer. And he's saying, is he going to find faith? Well, in the context of what we're talking about, what would that look like? If he does or doesn't find faith when he comes, what would it look like? I'll tell you what it would look like. The places and people where he's not finding faith are going to be the people who have ceased praying. But where he finds faith, what he's finding is people who are praying without ceasing. They're not giving up on prayer. And just because they pray a prayer and don't see the results, that's not enough to convince that person prayer doesn't work, because they already know Prayer does work. That's what faith is. Faith is praying in spite of what you've seen and are seeing. You pray because you believe. And that's the faith that Jesus is talking about here. So I tell you what, let's just leave it at that today. I have other principles on the slides there to go to. But we, like I say, we started late, and we want to just emphasize just one thing to grab a hold of. Say, I'm going to try to build a stronger prayer life and prayer walk with God right now than I had in the immediate past, maybe than I've ever had in my life. And I want to apply, and let's just apply this one thing going into this week, along with the things we've already looked at, and things that you're already contemplating without me bringing them up, that God's dealing with you about. And just see if we can't get convinced that prayer will work, and we're going to keep praying and never stop. Prayer is what I do. Arnold Schwarzenegger works out. That's good for him. I pray. That's what I do.